Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. I'm Chris with M7 Metalworks. Got a brand new project in. I literally just unloaded it from the vehicle. It is a big, massive, heavy-duty Wilton 600 vise. This has got 6-inch jaws. I've got some data here. My total length is 23 5/8 inch from the tail to the tip here. Its height is 11 5/8 inch, so just shy of a foot. It's on a swivel base. The jaws are screwed in from the back side here. It's just a mammoth beast. I'll take the camera and I'll pull you around and just kind of let you see it because I think it's really neat in, it's fresh barn find clothes, so to speak. That's literally where I found this. This was sitting in the dirt of a barn. I went there to pick up an old compressor, neat old Quincy compressor. And the guy said he had all sorts of other stuff and invited me to take a look at it. So I'm like, yeah, sure, I love tools. I love all that stuff. So he had 3 big vices like this. And I ended up picking up one of them. And he had a whole lot of other stuff, but he wasn't feeling well. So we weren't able to get as much stuff as I think we'll be able to get here in the future from him. Real nice guy. But I'll take you around. A few interesting things about the vise before we break it down. And the first thing I'll do is I'm going to shoot it with some oil, just some WD-40. The vise is in really good condition. So when I pull you around it, you're going to see the jaws. They have crisp, clean, square edges. I don't see a bunch of chipping or anything like that. Now, it's real stiff, so I can't really get this thing to open up right now. It's going to take a little bit of penetrating oil. Now, I hit it with a small hammer, and it moved on me. The jaws moved on me. It didn't take a whole lot to get it, just a good thump with a hammer in it, and it moved on me. But it's more than I want to do with just with my arms. So I think rather than fight the thing, and plus it's got some bolts in the back of the jaw here that hold those jaws on. We're just going to hit it with some penetrating oil, and that way I think things will come apart just a little bit easier. I want you to notice the anvil plate, how smooth and crisp the edges are. It was welded to the table, so they put a bead of weld here, and on the same side, or on the other side, same place between the 2 ears, they put a bead of weld there. So it was welded to the table. It wasn't bolted to the table. But I think, to be honest with you, I think I can salvage this base. I don't think it'll be that hard to grind the weld off. So anyways, let me take you around. Even notice the cap in the back. Even the cap looks perfect. Doesn't have any issues with it. The vise was literally sitting in a barn. Not only sitting in the barn, but this vise was sitting in the dirt. But you can see everything looks really good. You can still see clear lines there. You can even see a little bit of flaking of the kind of teal blue paint that it once had. There's our pin. You can see the base and the weld on the base and how they've broken that weld. But I honestly think I can salvage this base. Look how clean that anvil is. Yeah, it's pitted, but I'll get a lot of that out of there. That shouldn't be that hard. And I'm able to get that clean enough. You see the machining underneath it. We'll get these vise jaws off. They're held in by an Allen screw. So I'll definitely shoot some penetrating oil in there. Get a little bit of a look at those serrated jaws. Pretty cool. Again, you can see that original paint kind of coming through. So that's the Wilton 600. That's before, and we'll see it after once this restore is done. All right, guys, I'm taking a pause on the dismantling for a minute because I want to show you something. So as I was hitting this with the lead hammer, trying to pull these jaws apart, two of these screws popped off. So that's your retaining ring. That's what allows your jaw to be able to pull back out of the nut and out of the slide. So this thing's pretty bound up, and so I'm popping the heads off of these. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this off, probably remove the screw, and then I'm gonna have to remove these things, unfortunately, by getting something and wedging it in here. It's gonna take some time. This isn't gonna be a quick, easy tear down. I was hoping it would be. I was hoping I'd be able to get that thing pulled out, because it did move on me when I, I've got a slight gap between the jaws, so it did move some. That slide did pull out, but unfortunately it's not going to give it up easy. Here I'm just using the calipers to measure my distance between the two jaws. I'm using a bolt and a nut and some washers on the ends there just to allow me to spread the jaws apart. And ultimately this is what worked to get these jaws separated. You'll see as we go along. And here I just tried to use some heat, obviously, and this is very important when I'm trying to get something unstuck. Heat is my last resort, but it's generally the winning call. There it is. Here's my little pin. This ended up being the winning combination right here, guys. So I'm still using that 5/8" bolt and the nut to spread and put pressure on the two jaws to push them apart. But I would use my brass hammer and strike the vise, which created that shock wave through the vise, and then the weight of the vise pulling itself apart as well. Because the vise body's hanging like it is. This ultimately is what led to success for me in this case, but still a lot of work. I think we got her done here. I think she's loose. Okay, maybe the best way to go is just to lift this thing. Yep, there we go. Okay, whew, that was an absolute beast. Just taking a minute to clean the inside of this vise out. I think pulling the cap out the back and pulling the nut out is something that if I do, the benefits that I gain from it are very minimal compared to the effort and the potential issues I can have with these pins. It's not impossible to pull them out by any means. I've done it before, but if I don't have to, I would prefer not to even mess with any of that. And honestly, my only issue is because this vise was rusted together, I've got some buildup inside this, and I'll bring in and show you here. So I've got some buildup inside there. And so what I'm doing is I'm using wire brushes to just scrub the walls of this. This brush gets between the nut and the wall, the inside wall of this, and it gets out some of this crud that you can see. Alright guys, so you can see down in there a little bit. I'll shoot a little light down at the end. So we've got machine surface showing now real well, and I paid special attention to that key stock area where the key slides on that, just so it wouldn't get bound up. So we've got it pretty darn clean now. You can see now it goes in and out, nice and smooth. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna weld some of this up. All we're doing, guys, is we're building onto this. We're gonna build this up a little bit. So I've got the thickness here. It's got the strength. It's really just, not sure how well it comes up on camera, but it's really just where they brazed or welded. I guess they welded. I don't see any braze. They welded this to a table, and it's just taken that edge off. It's still plenty thick if you compare it to the sides that haven't been welded. It's still got all its girth and thickness. It's just got a little bit smaller pad that it sits on right here. So my only goal is just to put a little bit of weld bead into these. This is cast, some type of a cast iron, malleable iron. And so it won't weld super great, but Wiltons typically don't have a lot of trash in them, so they will generally weld up some. And remember, this isn't a structural weld, this is only cosmetic. Okay guys, so I've built it up a little bit, and there'll be, I'm sure, a ton of porosity in this thing, and I'll probably have some undercut in some areas. I can see right there I've got a little bit of undercut. I'm not going to get overly concerned about those types of areas. Little pinholes, or not pinholes, but little nicks, I guess, out of that. I can get concerned about all that kind of stuff. My paint will flow in there just fine. You can see the finished weld here, guys. I've done both sides and done some grinding. They're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but they're certainly going to be good enough for my needs. A shop vise is all this is going to be, so it doesn't have to be perfect, and the paint will cover a lot of those imperfections. And after a ton of filing, guys, we got the name and the initials off the anvil. I decided, because a lot of these parts aren't in particularly great condition, and I don't want to paint them, so I'm going ahead and using a bluing solution on them. And I think that gives me the most, the nicest, cleanest look. And as you can see here, I went ahead and blued the jaws as well. And now it's time to paint. I went ahead and cleaned everything up with acetone. And now we're using a Rust-Oleum hammered, I think it's a teal paint. I believe it's Rust-Oleum's equivalent to what the original Wilton vise would have had from the factory. Well, welcome back, guys. We've got her freshly painted, and we're ready to assemble this thing now. I went to the hardware store and I've did a few upgrades. So these are the bolts that would normally attach your jaws to the vise. I went ahead and got some stainless. I consider that an upgrade simply because it doesn't rust as badly as regular steel. I also got some new screws. These originally came with the Phillips head screws. I again got some stainless Allen head cap screws for that. And I think they're not overly long. I don't think they're too long, but if they are, I can always put them on the grinder and grind them down just a bit, but I don't think they are. I think that'll be just fine. I am going to use some antices. I won't put all that on video because I won't bore you to death. These are black oxide, and that's just so that on these little nuts that go on for the swivel base, that's just so they can rotate on that and not just sit there and chew into that cast iron vise body. So that's kind of why I got the black oxide. It matches. I blued everything. I blued the jaws. I blued the retainer clip. I blued everything, and I'm going to leave it blued. I really like it. I've put a light coat of oil on everything, and I will mix up a slurry of gear oil and grease. So that's what I've been doing here lately with my vices, and I mix that slurry up just so that I'm diluting that grease a little bit. And for me, it works better. I just think the grease is too thick and the gear oil is too thin. So I kind of meet somewhere in the middle where I'm happy at. And so I'm going to use the slurry on the lead screw, and then I'll probably use gear oil on the slide. I've already went ahead and oiled my lead screw and my slide. I actually put just a little bit of gear oil inside, just a small film on the inside of that, and then again just a small film on this. I didn't get crazy. Too much of that can lead to it kind of wanting to stick, and then over time oil and grease can harden up and it can become problematic if we're not careful. So now we're just gonna slide that guy in there. And that's what we should feel, a nice smooth. And I've used that slurry that I mentioned earlier that I would be mixing with the gear oil and the grease. And so that's what I've done. And just painted it on lightly with a brush. Again, not overkill. I didn't take a palm full of grease and oil and smear it into the threads. That's not necessary. Okay, I've shortened these little screws here and reapplied my anti-seize. And so that now they're in. Now we can go in and out. I mean, boy, what a far cry this is from when we got it, you know, and it wouldn't even move. So just smooth, smooth, smooth. Feels so good. It was right here. All right, so here's our base. So our base goes up in there, locks in there, and that's what keeps it from spinning or rotating. Oh, that's almost more than I can do. Okay. I did forget to put a little oil on there. I'm getting just a light coating of that slurry. And take two, I guess. I forgot to get the little pin inside the center of that. Don't forget that on your vise, like I did. Not the end of the world, but we'll have to pull it off again, like I did. Washer. Yeah. I think we'll see how that one goes there. I don't know how well it's going to show up on camera, but the top sides of these has a little bit of pitting and the occasional little chigger, whereas the bottoms are for the most part relatively smooth and clean. So I believe these are reversible. In other words, I can flip, not reversible, but you can flip them upside down. And so that's what I'm doing in hopes that that's not an issue. Holes seem to line up okay there. I'm not tightening these down right now. I'm just putting them in, and then I'll grab my ratchet socket for these, Allen head socket, and get them in. Didn't quite take. I think I got a few threads on it. All right, so let's see how they align. I already see So you see that misalignment there. You see the misalignment. So we need to correct that. So now what we're going to have to do is we'll switch sides on these and see if that corrects it. If it doesn't correct it, I maybe have no choice but to put the jaws the way they were. And flip them. I'll put this one over here. And put this one over here. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's any better than the other. We're going to basically flip the jaws the way they were from the factory. See if we get that alignment better. I'd rather have a little bit of pitting up on top. Now look at the alignment. It is perfect. Now these jaws being flipped up on the where these were on the top originally, they do have a few, and those are very minor, but I don't like it so much. This side lines up very well as well. We do have just a little bit of a lip right there on both sides. So there is a little meat on the top of that just to take some of that pitting off. And so we are going to do that. If you know anything about blacksmithing, that's a big part of guys chipping anvil edges, is because they haven't chamfered those edges. Dress the edges of your anvil is what I've always read and heard, and it's important. Now you can see the alignment of those jaws. Way better. And not near as much pitting on top. I've still got some here and on the back side there. And then of course I've got that chip out. Now we'll bring in, see if my camera will focus well enough. You see how I've chamfered those edges. Done it all the way around. And that's just to prevent chipping like that. If it didn't have the sharp edges, it probably would not have chipped. Those sharp edges put all that pressure on that sharp corner and end up causing a chip out. Get a look at those stainless cap screws. See how that base turned out. This side turned out just a little bit better than the other side. This side you can see where I welded at. And if that bothered me, I could very easily just scratch that up, scuff that up, and shoot it with some more paint, and I'm sure that would be the end of seeing it, but it doesn't really bother me. There's those stainless Allen screws in there. So guys, that's the vise. It functions absolutely beautifully. You can see it has no screws on this side. Those screws screw in through the back, which I think is the big advantage to the Wilton 600. Being just a little bit better vise than what they typically make. And it's a huge thing. That's a 5-inch Hollands over there. And, you know, the Wilton is massive. So thanks for watching, guys.